welcome to our GEMA Talks vidcast series. I'm thrilled to introduce our interview subject today, terrific Hoya alum, Chris Kelly. Chris is has a long, really interesting long career, particularly in Silicon Valley. He's a tech and media executive and investor. He also happens to be co-owner of the Sacramento Kings, and so we'll have an interesting conversation today about the ramifications of the coronavirus on the NBA. He'll have some interesting insights to share for us. You know, as you may know, Chris, after law school, after Georgetown and then attending Harvard Law School, he clerked in San Diego, and then he became the general counsel and chief privacy officer and compliance officer for Facebook, was employee number 25, I believe, so was in very early stages of that company. And since then, again, has had a terrific career, mostly in Silicon Valley. He's done a lot of investing in the media and tech space, and I know now is doing consulting to Facebook today, which is, I'm sure, a full circle moment for him. So I want to say hello, Chris, and welcome to our show.
Thanks so much for having me, Rich, and it's great to talk to the GEMA audience. And you know, just as we all survived through this pretty crazy quarantine period, hanging out in our homes, doing Zoom calls, and but enjoying each other's company from afar, socially distant.
Absolutely. Well, first, I just want to check on you. How are you? How is your family? And
they're doing great.
You're in San Francisco, right?
So in Atherton.
You're in Atherton. Okay.
Right in the heart of Silicon Valley, and sort of, you know, kids running in and out, and you know, everybody's they're off of actual even distance school this week. They've been home since the you know, sort of mid-March, but this week is normal spring break, so there's not even the 10 a.m. Zoom check-in with their classes this time around. And then, you know, just trying to keep in touch with everyone. I've been fairly busy on Facebook stuff since the company has been quite aggressive in responding to coronavirus, and with Mark and Priscilla's you know, particular expertise and care about you know, pandemics over time, and also, you know, infectious disease. The Chan Zuckerberg BioHub employs Joe DeRisi, who was one of the discoverers of SARS. So they've been on top of this for quite some time. Priscilla's a medical doctor. So they're doing another series. They've done, you know, interviews with, Mark did a Facebook Live with Anthony Fauci. He did one with Gavin Newsom here in California, and then Mark and Priscilla are doing another one with another infectious disease specialist this afternoon. So the company's been super active and super you know, aggressive in making sure that good information gets to people in this time of need.
Yeah, I look forward to chatting a little bit more about Facebook in a moment. I want to start with the NBA and basketball. Certainly for me, as a huge fan of the sport, but it must have been as a co-owner a surreal moment on, I'll never forget the date of March 11th, when there's a confluence of events in the country, in one including the NBA suspending the season. So take us back to that day, and what was it like for you? What were you doing at that?
We were very much in the middle of it. We would have been the last game that got played that night. We were scheduled to go at 7:30. It had been moved back for ESPN to be the featured game of the week with against the Pelicans, and playing for the 9, to be in the 9 seed, to be set up to hopefully move to the 8 seed and make the playoffs.
Right.
And you know, so we were getting ready to go, and Ken Goldman, who's part of the Warriors ownership group, was joining me and Vivek, our lead owner, to head out from Palo Alto over to Sacramento to enjoy the game. The Warriors had already announced that the subsequent night they were supposed to play the Nets in Chase Center in San Francisco, and they had announced already that they were going to play without fans that night. That was part of the you know, banning gatherings of over 1,000 that Mayor London Breed in San Francisco had already announced. So they were already in an interesting spot, and that was going to be their plan. And Ken was, you know, sort of sharing that with us. And we were getting ready to go to leave from the Palo Alto airport. We got an alert saying that, and Vivek had been on calls with Adam Silver and the other governors sort of the rest of the day. A good chunk of the rest of the day planning, and we got an alert that the Oklahoma City game was being delayed initially, and so obviously it was a kind of odd situation. We took off, still expecting us to get our game off that night. By the time we landed, it was announced that Rudy Gobert had tested positive, that was the reason for the sort of suspension and then permanent sort of delay of the Oklahoma City game, the Oklahoma City Utah game. And we went to the arena thinking that we were still going to try to get the game in, and we found out as we got there that one of the referees had reffed the Monday night game that Utah had played, and so would have been exposed to Gobert at least, and that was an issue for our guys. Said that they still wanted to play, but the Pelicans guys decided that was a bridge too far, and we wanted to be respectful of that, and so it didn't happen. 7:30 came. The ESPN crew was there. We had fans in the arena. Everything was ready to go, and it didn't go. And there was a slight delay, and then it was announced about a half an hour later that we were permanently postponing the game, and we weren't going to get that one last game off. So it was a surreal experience, and we came back home and sort of started to look at all the other news and everything else. And one of the things that the league had been in agreement on was when a player tested positive, if a player tested positive, that there would be a suspension, and that went into effect right away.
So what? So given what's transpired since then, what are the key issues the Kings are grappling with or have to navigate through?
So as we were in the arena, we were already discussing making sure that our arena employees were paid, and it was clear to us that was going to be a front and center issue, and we were already basically in agreement. To figure out how to do that well, and then we had to think about other effects of the shutdown. Obviously we didn't know for sure if the concerts that were coming up were going to be postponed. It became very clear very quickly that was going to happen too. And then we needed to think about, sort of being in a mode of operation where we were as helpful as we could be to what was going to be the effort that was going to come down the pike. So we've been very active, Vivek and I and some of our other members of the ownership group, and obviously our line executives who run the team day to day, have been extraordinarily plugged into the discussions in Sacramento about how to handle this for the state and make everyone ready. We announced on Friday that our old arena, which we still control, which was Sleep Train Arena, but it's still a lot of folks still know it as Arco. It's officially called the Natomas Arena now, but that will be used as a backup field hospital. And the governor and Vivek and the mayor of Sacramento yesterday did an announcement there, a formal announcement that was being set up, and we hope it won't have to be used, but we're ready if it needs to be, and have been very active on calls and discussions with that. And also, with the state and Facebook have been very aggressively connected on how to spread good information and how to continue to be ready to support healthcare professionals. We're also looking as a team about other ways that we can support the healthcare effort and response. And we'll roll a number of those out as we kind of get them done. But it's a very active process. We want to be as helpful as we can to the state and to the locality in Sacramento, and to the national effort too, obviously.
So what are your thoughts on? I know I'm not going to ask you the question you get asked, which is when is the NBA coming back? You don't know.
It's okay to ask that question. The answer is I don't know.
Some of that? What's sort of happening behind the scenes?
Adam Silver and Ernie Johnson did a pretty great interview yesterday. I don't know which video conferencing software they used. If it was Zoom or Blue Jeans or or Google Hangouts or WebEx or whatever. But it was definitely a fun kind of side by side as they were both at home. And Adam gave the right answer, which is we don't know for sure. Obviously, we'd love to come back sooner rather than later. There have been a couple of things that we've been able to do. We had a Players 2K tournament that ran on ESPN last Friday, Saturday, and
Yeah,
Sunday.
how was that as an experiment?
Harrison Barnes from our squad unfortunately got blown out by Trey Young in the first round, and well, Trey, they got to pick the different teams, and Trey had the Bucks, so a lot of the first the first rounders were picking the Bucks. Yeah. And they couldn't pick them in subsequent rounds, so I didn't pay attention to the way that it went after that. But that was a fun little engagement point. Yeah. The league does have the sponsored 2K a regular 2K league that runs, that's continuing to run. Yeah, at a distance play right now. There's been some discussion about other things that players would be participating in, including potentially a horse tournament and things like that. So I think you'll see some engagement by the NBA to provide things. One of the most interesting things for me as both a fan and just as a person who likes to sometimes stay home and settle in. When you settle in for long periods, you expect to have access to movies and to sports. And there's movies, but there's no sports. So there's been some pretty fascinating reach backs on the part of both the RSN that Comcast Sportsnet that broadcasts us, showing a bunch of old Kings games. And then you've seen also a lot of kind of baseball rebroadcasts on some of the sports radio stations and also on Comcast Sportsnet. Right. I last night they had on the Tim Lincecum perfect game from I guess 5 years ago now, and I had been able to be at that Giants game live, so right. nice chance to relive that. And we had a few buzzer beaters from our guys that from the last seasons that they reran, but ultimately people are looking for new content, and we want to provide it as quickly as possible. And also we're in the playoff chase, so we want to get back to it.
Do you think they will, when they restart the season, they'll do it without fans?
I think that's the likely outcome at this point, because it will allow the leagues to get back sooner, and I think that you're seeing baseball explore that option to get things started as well. And so I do think that there will be some sort of limited explorations on that, and then there everything is on the table to try to get this restarted in a reasonable way, because people want access to their sports again, and that's a core part of what it means to be a fan, and a lot of people are fans, and they're missing it desperately right now. So we want to provide as best we can.
Do you think there'll be any long-term ramifications on sports attendance or the experience in the stadiums?
I think there's going to be some concern for some time after this. I mean, this is a unprecedented happening in our lifetime, and from a world economic perspective, it's something, there's never been a worldwide immediate demand crash the way that it's happened, and where you have this kind of fear that's going to be somewhat inevitable about open spaces and other people. And so I do think that there will be much more attention to hygiene and personal hygiene, and the way that people are shaking hands or not shaking hands, and in close proximity to each other or not. I hope that people will be a lot more responsible if they're feeling ill and stay home if they're feeling ill going forward. But we'll see over time. I do think that it's a very natural human impulse to gather and to enjoy sports and concerts and everything else. And so I don't think that that's going to be in any way destroyed or sort of reconfigured in a major way. I think that you will see a roaring return to the live event space, but it may be 6 months or a year before it's anywhere close to the level that it was before. And I think that from a business perspective, I think that we're going to have to focus on how to make people comfortable after being getting everybody acclimatized to social distancing, how we get them back into being together.
Let's shift gears now to the world of tech and media. And again, as someone who's been in the Silicon Valley world for many years now, give our audience some insights on how is this affecting venture capital community, both the VCs, early stage startups, early stage funded companies? What are you seeing?
The early stuff right now is pretty. The discussions are still going on among companies and venture backers. I don't think you're going to see a lot of deals closed in that space unless it's stuff like video conferencing
And deals are being paused as well.
a lot of deals are being paused,
Okay.
and I don't think that that's a healthy thing for the ecosystem. I'm not sure how long that pause is going to go on. I think it's just people are still processing through the shock. We're still in the first few weeks of this.
Right.
And now that everybody knows that it's at least another month that they're looking at as a kind of, shelter in place approach to things, I think that in another week or so, you'll start to see a little bit of folks to say, okay, these are good deals. Maybe we'll get them done. And I think you'll see announcements get amplified because there will be so few of them. But there will probably be some indications. There's been a few deals that have been sort of on the verge of closing or closed before this that have been announced now. Usually bigger, sort of more advanced deals where companies are not pre-revenue. But now are facing a different type of situation where everyone's working from home. They want to make sure that the payroll, is well covered. And for companies that have grown some, if they don't have 18 months of cash in the bank, they want to make sure that they're showing sort of strength at this point. And you've seen this for later stage companies like Airbnb,
Sure.
stepping into another $1 billion cash line from Silver Lake. And I think SoFi has also done a big deal, in that space, and they announced a major acquisition today as well. So I think you're seeing I think you actually will see a lot of M&A activity among later stage companies to figure out how they can work together and how they can protect what they've built, especially if they're not fully profitable and burning cash in any way, shape, or form.
Do you see a situation where, obviously people are saying companies like Zoom and other companies that will benefit from folks that are, remotely working and the like? Do you see a sort of an uptick in investments in those? Do you think that's just sort of a transitory time, or do you think that could be a long-term effect?
I think you're going to see quite a flood into the video conferencing space, and thoughts about how people interact well and in an immersive environment at distance, and everything from you obviously aren't standing in front of Healy Hall right now. That there are fun things that can be added there, and I've noticed just in corresponding with my kids and sometimes even my dad over Portal, you've got AR overlays and all sorts of interesting things that go through that perspective. Obviously, Facebook has been involved in the VR and AR space through Oculus primarily, and I think that you'll certainly see them continue to be very active in thinking about what the next layers of virtualization look like. And I think that you'll see a number of the bigger companies. Obviously, Google has played in this space a bit, and they will continue. Apple is obviously getting more and more active, and I think that with Alexa and Eero and Ring and all the things that Amazon has put together, that they'll be increasingly active in this space, and you're going to have a bunch of enhancement of home technologies that are about distance connection and feeling more immersive. So I think some small companies will get funded in this space, but I think the big players are going to end up sort of putting a lot on their platforms and plugging it into the more general intelligence that they've built. Facebook with the social graph and social layer, Google with both a social layer and sort of a search as an intent marker for people. Amazon with the Alexa service and with the logistics that they've built. There's a whole bunch of interesting things about how we experience each other at distance that are going to be major focuses for the tech industry for the next few years.
And I read a quote yesterday from an unnamed CEO who said, "We absolutely will own less real estate. We'll have more people working from home, and we'll focus more on that path." Do you think that's true and will be pervasive, or do you think that's just one person's opinion?
I'm not sure about owning less real estate over time. I think that where the real estate is going to change a lot, and I think that you will see a lot more remote working in general, and comfort with virtualization of teams.
Yeah, I
You
do
know,
too.
there is still a special sauce of having everybody together for collisions, as Tony Hsieh from Zappos likes to talk about. And as Facebook continues to maintain large facilities in a number of different places, and I think that's not going away. The aircraft carrier sized buildings that sit over in Menlo Park, a couple of miles from me, are going to continue to get bigger. The construction goes on over there. And Apple's huge new facilities open, and I expect them to open more. I expect Google to continue to take real estate in the Bay Area, and also in other places too. But I do think that you'll see a lot more remote work, both from big companies and smaller ones. And as the virtualization and experience grow, and as this is all proven out that these video conferences can be handled, and by the net that's been built out already, you're going to see a lot more usage of it. One thing about Zoom that's been fascinating, is some of the reaction around Zoom bombing and
Security issues.
inserting the security and privacy issues that when they had 10 million monthly users, and it was a very kind of controlled experiment, that it was pretty rare there's sort of more a security by obscurity that had been operating. But when you grow to 200 million monthly users as in a month, that they become both a bigger target, and a lot of things that were exploits that are available are sort of instantly turned into active exploits. And you see things like when you're invading journalists' webcasts, as has happened a couple of times, and classrooms that are trying to get things done, the reports get pretty aggressive, and the regulators get pretty aggressive because they want to show themselves being out there on the front lines. And so Zoom has felt a lot of that heat very, very quickly.
I think if Zoom was smart, they'd put a call into Chris Kelly. And,
well, I mean, I do have quite a few things going on right now, but I always like to be helpful to people who are facing these challenges.
Yeah. Let's talk about Facebook specifically. Obviously, a company you're intimately familiar with. I know you mentioned doing some consulting to them now. How do you think they've navigated through this thus far, and what do you see for Facebook moving forward?
This has been a focal point from the top, with Mark and Priscilla as a medical doctor, and with Cheryl and a number of the other players, realizing instantaneously that there was a great and important role for Facebook to play in getting out solid information and in fighting misinformation about a very, very scary experience for humanity. And so that was, everything was turned on a dime. I mean, my work with them had previously focused on the Libra cryptocurrency and on some political outreach, but it's sort of instantaneously been transformed into how is the company effectively responding to the corona threat for humanity. And so that has been what almost all executives are spending their time on right now. And it's,
how would you specifically help them?
So a lot of it's been on communications and policy efforts to make sure, and given my my history with the Democratic Party, and that I've worked in the Clinton White House and with a number of different players over the years. I left Facebook to run for Attorney General here in California, a race that I lost to Senator Kamala Harris. And and so I have quite a number of different ties in that community that I'm trying to make sure that we've got coordination happening well on that front. I mean, I get along well with Republicans too, but I've focused a lot on outreach in the Democratic Party, and it's all been kind of coronavirus based of late. And the ties with Sacramento as well, with the Newsom administration here, have quite a number of different friends in that administration, and also with our King's efforts, and with Facebook wanting to be very active in this area, have been try to help them to smooth some edges to get conversations happening that should be happening, where Facebook, the company, can be very effective in carrying out the state's mandate to shelter in place, and to know more and more about how to halt the spread of coronavirus.
And from a business standpoint, I got to believe Facebook usage is
it's skyrocketing.
From an advertising standpoint, though,
From the advertising standpoint,
How are they handling those sort of
we're
things?
seeing and expecting some challenges. But from a usage standpoint, particularly for the communications tools, both in video calling in Messenger and WhatsApp, usage of the core Facebook service, usage of Instagram,
Right.
all through the roof. And so dealing with usage spikes that have been sort of exceeding previous peaks, and making sure that all the that the trains run on time, that the information gets to people, is a major focus of large parts of the organization. And so that has worked extraordinarily well so far. Uptime has been almost perfect, and the surge that's happened. There was some acceleration of product rollouts where Messenger didn't have a desktop product such that you could easily do video calls from your laptop, and that became a much more desirable use case for people. Folks had used them quite extensively through Facebook portals and through their phones, but but there hadn't been a desktop client for Mac and for Windows. That got rolled out quickly, and now is sort of part of the mix. And I don't have any usage stats on that, and I'm not sure the company's sharing them anyway. But I would anticipate that they've.
But a perfect example of how a company did a quick pivot during this time to serve the customer.
That's right, and that was the thing that had been on the product roadmap, but was accelerated in order to meet this time. And there's been a lot of adjustment on that, where everybody across the organization is saying, how does this help with the fight against coronavirus?
Let's turn to more to media now. You've had again in the last probably decade, you've been investing in really the intersection of tech and media. You made some really interesting investments, built some interesting companies. What's your perspective on the ramifications of coronavirus, more specific to the media and entertainment world?
Well, obviously, people are looking to be able to spend their time at home, to have great experiences and see great storytelling, and with some more time on their hands. Right. And so, when you take out the travel time for everyday work, when you take out the expectations of everyday work that you're supposed to be someplace else, and the sort of back and forth that most people have, and when you're also sort of stuck with your entire family, which you may not be used to, except for on vacations, you're going to see a lot of pretty interesting behavioral data points, is the way that I would put it right now. Right. And there will definitely be anecdotal and over time, I think, some really interesting survey and deep data based studies of that. I think that you're going to see massive usage spikes on Netflix and all the new streaming services. Quibi, I was surprised that Quibi didn't accelerate their launch, which finally happened on Monday. I actually had done a Twitter post as the quarantine started to break. It's like, why isn't Quibi accelerating their launch right now? But I guess that they were close enough to launch, and they kind of had their plan set, that with the right amount of promotion and picking the right offer to get as many people on as they could. They ended up going with the 90-day free, and we'll see what their stats, what they want.
What do you think of Quibi overall? What do you think?
I haven't been as thrilled by the programming as I would have liked. I've watched my Chrissy's Court, which I thought would be funnier than it is, I've always loved the People's Court and Judge Judy and everything else, and right. I think Chrissy Teigen is hilarious. But it hasn't sort of hit its stride yet. Right. I'll watch a few more episodes to see if it does, and and then I'll experiment with some of the other sort of venues. I'm a big believer in short video storytelling. I'm an advisor to a company called Hooked that started as text chat and has evolved into video, and is just a fascinating play and a lot of fun. And one that I'm a deep believer in. So I do think that you'll see all sorts of of evolution in this space. And I think that the at-home time is going to allow people to think about what they want that experience to look like. Like everybody else, I've caught up on the series that I really loved before. So I rewatched a bunch of Billions to get ready for the new season. When Ozark season 3 hit last weekend, I binged it out and sort of caught up on the dealings of our lovely money launderers in the Ozarks, and Jason Bateman and Laura Linney, right. And then I have been drawn into Tiger King.
You and millions of others,
as so many people have, and
actually haven't seen it yet, but
really something else. I do recommend it.
Yes, no, I heard it's just insane.
Yes, it is insane. That is the appropriate description.
What do you make of the streaming wars in general? I'll be curious to get your perspective.
It is going to be a war of all.
Who are the winners and losers?
So it's really hard to tell right now, and the question is how aggressive the big players are going to go after this on a price war basis. I do think that people are going to look at, if you add up your $7.99s and your $11.99s and your $2.99s and everything else, and you come to $100 a month that or $150 a month at your cable bill, you're not going to be too happy, and that you're going to start making pretty aggressive choices about that. The question of how these aggregators operate in the space, and how the technology companies that especially Amazon and Apple, and to a lesser extent Google and eventually Facebook. We'll see how Facebook plays in the space, and I don't think that they've made a decision at this point, and I think that that's probably a good thing for them in the long run. You've seen some good promotion of Facebook Watch and some original shows, and you've had a few hits in Red Table Diaries with Jada Pinkett Smith and a few other things that have sort of bounced through Facebook Watch, a couple of sports series that have gotten some note. But Facebook's not all in on this in an interesting way, and we'll see where they go with this over time. But Amazon clearly is, and they're getting more aggressive, not less. And then the interesting
TV Plus has been interesting. I'm curious. I'm curious how you thought it. They've been, I think, quite conservative in this rollout, and I don't know how that bodes for them.
Yeah, exactly. And so, sort of good, expensive content that's been solid. I mean, I watched the morning show and I was impressed with it. But then you can't make a series and a play on 4 or 5 things, and so they don't really have a library. Whereas Disney is in this amazing place and has built up their library over time with the Marvel acquisition, with the Pixar acquisition, with the Bob Iger now not taking a salary because he's made so much money off of stock increases and everything else over the years. More power to him. It's been a very, very great run for the Disney Corporation. I think that you're going to see some more obscure people sneak through over time as the big players sort of bounce around. But some of them have gotten swept up. I played in this space with a little streamer focused on indie called Fandor.
Right.
Unfortunately, we had to put it into reorganization because it wasn't working the way it was. It may emerge from that. We'll see. I have some hopes for it. And then the premise-based watching and the first-run movie business is something that's always been a fascinating play for me. I for some time I had a controlling interest in MoviePass that I sold to what turned out to be.
We could do a whole other.
We can do a whole different discussion about that. But this crisis could kill a number of the major exhibitors. Kill them dead, because to go from a capital intensive real estate based business and to immediately have zero revenue is that's just stunning thing. And when your only margin business is based on people showing up and buying popcorn, to have your higher margin revenue go to absolutely zero, to have no sort of safety net in the other base revenue that kind of pays your bills every day. you're in a world of hurt. And so AMC furloughed everyone, including the CEO. I mean, they kind of had to.
Yes. No,
So it remains to be seen how that comes back and in what form.
Do you have any views on ad-supported streaming? Obviously, NBC decided to go with Peacock, and you're seeing more of that. You're seeing some major acquisitions of Tubi and
yeah, exactly,
which is based up north.
And jumping in on Pluto, and
yeah,
I think that you will see.
Any thoughts? Do you think that?
I think ad-supported models are going to be okay. I think that everyone's used to, in the advertising industry, buying video ads and reaching consumers based on data, and they want better data, and they'll get better data on these platforms than they do on cable and certainly on broadcast right now. So I think that ad-supported businesses will do reasonably well. You'll continue to have a consumer revolt on that because people hate the interruption, and that they want to avoid it as much as they can. But the question is, will they pay up enough, in a monthly subscription price or a yearly subscription price, to cover that revenue loss for those who don't go with an ad product or who have the differentials. Quibi has this differential, $4.99 a month with ads and $7.99 a month without.
Right.
We'll see how much people buy it, and if people find the content compelling. If there's some breakout hit that everybody feels that they need to grab on that.
Part of because I'm bullish on ad-supported streaming, and part of my belief on it is there's 70 billion spent every year on television advertising. It's clearly shifting, and it has to go somewhere. And these advertisers they're not going away. They're dying to find places to advertise. And
that's been an amazing benefit to YouTube in particular, and has turned into just an incredible revenue stream for Google as they bought YouTube, and so it will go somewhere. And Facebook obviously wants to play fairly aggressively in that space, and has built technology and bought technology as well around that that allows them to do both automated insertion of short video ads and more manual processes for people who can plan the breaks and things like that, and easy creation tools for folks who want to build their own series. And you're going to see a lot more experimentation in that space, especially since people have more time on their hands. There were a few pieces today and yesterday in particular around the Quibi launch that I got it completely wrong, basically saying it's a terrible time for them to launch because it was all built around people watching these things on the go. Right. I don't buy that. I think it's a great time for them to launch, and as people have a lot more time on their hands to experiment with different things. And I think that this is a stroke of luck for them, that they're going to have a lot more attention than they would have had to kind of break through otherwise.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you a more Georgetown-centric question now. One collateral damage, if you will, of the crisis for graduating seniors who are interested in working in tech or media, and also juniors who are looking to get internships for the summer. A lot of them are now a lot of those opportunities are frozen. I'm curious if you have any advice for those two groups, the summer internship group and the group looking for jobs now over the next 3 to 4 months.
First of all, my condolences to everyone, because it is an ugly environment out there, and uglier than I think anyone has ever seen in our lifetime. And so it's going to be a scramble based, hope, use every leverage point you can, use your Georgetown network well, ask around, think about where some of the spikes are going to be. I think that you'll see, big tech maintain a number of those programs. And I certainly expect that out of.
Facebook has a summer internship?
Yeah, so Facebook does have a summer program, and I don't think that there's been any changes. I should probably ask around about that. Yeah. My intuition tells me that there have been no changes, and that there's probably been a reaffirmation of the fact that those programs are starting. I could be wrong, but I'll have to take a look on that. Definitely the attitude that I've seen from Facebook executives has been, we're going to keep doing what we were doing, and we're going to emphasize, COVID affected areas where we feel that we can be, particularly helpful. And, some of the changes that are being sort of wrought in the world over this, how do we think ahead and how do we build more people into that process? So the expansion plans for the company have been quite extensive. Cheryl said publicly that the company expects to add 10,000 jobs this year. And so I think you'll see those internship plans continue. There might be a couple of, obviously people aren't going to be able to show up on campus in May, or maybe in May, but not in April. The early birds aren't welcome at this point, since everyone's at home.
Sure. Why don't we turn to your? We've talked a lot about obviously the coronavirus crisis we're in. Maybe just shift gears here and love to talk. Well, we have this great opportunity with time with you to talk about your unbelievable and interesting career. Going from Georgetown undergrad, going to Harvard Law School, clerking. You started out at probably the most well-known Silicon Valley law firms, Wilson Sonsini, and then to Facebook at an early stage, and then going into investing and being an executive, running for attorney general, co-owning the Sacramento Kings. So an unbelievable journey. Any lessons, any through line that you could share with people in all of this for you?
Well, ultimately, like the businesses that I've liked the most are about human connection. And so it was always I grew up in Silicon Valley, and so I grew up in San Jose. I went to Bellarmine, the Jesuit high school in San Jose, and I started college at Berkeley actually. And I decided it was too big and too close to home. And as I like to joke, especially with my Georgetown people, I went full heathen. Was
your high school a feeder to Georgetown?
It was, and so quite a number of us from my year, Sam Accardo, Jeff Ball. So Sam, who's now the mayor of San Jose, and who I'm with around a lot of this Corona response, and Drew Hallen, and a couple other guys. There was a big Georgetown Bellarmine contingent, so it was comfortable for me to step back into that. Yeah. But I wanted to explore some of the political opportunities in DC as well, and see if that was an area where I felt that I could contribute over time. And so have always, after I left, I started a PhD program in political theory at Yale, which I decided was a crazy waste of my time, and left that to join this obscure presidential campaign led by this Southern governor called Bill Clinton in 1992. In the fall of 1992, actually the fall of 1991, I started working with them, and so came back to DC and really sort of plugged in a bit more to the political culture, and took advantage of what the Georgetown connections that I built by working on Capitol Hill, and sort of, but that human element of thinking about how to do things together and effectively was always something that ran as a path through what I wanted to do. When I got to Harvard out of the administration, there was a group that was thinking about how digital technology was going to transform the law. And that later became what's now known as the Berkman Klein Center for Internet Society at Harvard. And so I worked with a lot of the people who founded that early on, but still with this picture of how technology is ultimately about enhancing human connection, instead of, it's all going to be, science fiction, robot world and AI, and, machines will run everything. Although I always had an appreciation for fun dystopian visions of the future, like the Terminator and everything else that you see. I showed my kids with my wife's permission, after quite some discussion, I showed my kids The Matrix the other night. And I said it's no more violent than any of the Marvel movies, right. Which is true. And so that type of approach is something that we have to fear on some levels, but for the most part, if you keep the focus on human connection over time, you can figure out how to enhance it and hopefully work better and build trust and all of these different things. And I think that technology, and as I've understood it, I've always wanted it to be about that. so when I got back out here, I figured that I would be representing startups, and that it would be, sort of a grand, paradise of legal practice, and it kind of was. I represented Netscape against Microsoft in the antitrust battle that they had, trying to make sure that there was an open competitive market for startups, and allowing that over time, and then always had an affinity for entrepreneurs who would step out and try to do things differently, and that made it very easy for me to join first. When I ended up at Baker McKenzie, when my first startup, we'd sold it to a company that failed. Excited Home was supposed to be the AOL of broadband, and back end of most cable modems, but ultimately the cable companies decided that they wanted to take over that business for themselves. And but we were the back end for Comcast and AT&T Broadband and Cox Cable and all of those for quite some time. Basically everybody but Time Warner Cable. And then that business got parceled out for a bunch of different good and bad reasons, and the company failed. But when I got to Baker, I wanted to take a more international approach to the practice, and thought that there was a lot of technology work that could be done there. And so I represented Google and eBay and DirecTV in their interactive television work, and but thinking all the while, how is this allowing people to connect and to tell stories, and always had a deep affection for media too. So when Spoke Software, which was my first company after Baker, came around, it was sort of a LinkedIn competitor, based a lot more on automated crawling of corporate networks by permission and with control. We knew that privacy was going to be a big deal around those sort of things, and there were a couple other competitive players in that space, but LinkedIn ended up being the one that was winning. And so it wasn't odd to me when I worked in digital music back at Wilson. I had gotten to know a kid named Sean Parker at Napster, and when Sean came to me in the summer of 2005 and said, "Hey, I'm doing this thing over at Facebook now. You should come over and meet Mark Zuckerberg," it wasn't odd for me to go, take that meeting, and thank goodness for that on a bunch of different levels. So and all my friends made fun of me for going to work for a 21-year-old kid who was, still supposed to be in school and all these different things. And, but I felt pretty good about it at the time. And, and we went through there. Actually, Stephen Levy has now done a very, very good book about the early days of Facebook.
Is that right?
That's just come out, and it gives a pretty good read on those early times. So if you want to check that out, I do recommend it.
I will, for sure. Good. And talk about your getting involved in the NBA.
Yeah. So so when I lost the AG race in 2010, I immediately sort of looked to investing possibilities and a couple advisory things, and sort of wanted to figure out what I was going to do, and bounced around for a few years on that. Did some media investment, set up the streaming company, did some financial technology work that including a pretty big play that should have been Robinhood, but we unfortunately lost in that marketplace for a bunch of bad reasons. But we were onto something, and then when it got to about late 2012, the Kings saga in Sacramento was coming potentially to an end, and eventually the owners at the time, the Maloof family, based in Beverly Hills and Las Vegas, and
they were going to move them, right?
What?
They were going to move them.
They were going to. So for a couple of years, they were trying to move them to Anaheim and Virginia Beach, and there were a whole bunch of different things under discussion. And then eventually they decided to sell the team, and they had settled on and signed a deal with a Seattle-based group led by actually San Francisco hedge fund guy, but who was really a Seattleite, and Steve Ballmer from Microsoft, who I knew very well from the antitrust case, and who I'd actually gotten to know as a human being because he led Microsoft's investment in Facebook, and who I like Steve Ballmer a lot. But they had they and the Nordstrom family also were the other major backers of that bid. So they had this signed deal, but Sacramento had a secret weapon in that Kevin Johnson, former NBA point guard, Cal star, Phoenix Sun star, was the mayor of Sacramento at the time, and had a relationship with David Stern. And David Stern had an experience with the relocation of the Supersonics, interestingly enough, to Oklahoma City, that wasn't entirely positive. And so we thought that there was an opportunity to put together a California-based group. And KJ started talking about having people to support it, locals, and then people around the state. And so I started talking to KJ, who I'd known from politics, and said, hey, I'd be interested. And then he started making these big distinctions between like the people who were actually going to run the deal and this local owners group that he was trying to put together. And I said, hey, who do I talk to about that? Because I can afford to play in that, because Fortune has smiled on me, and he says, well, Ron Burkle is going to run that. Do you know Ron? And I said, yeah, actually I do, also from politics. And so so I went and I talked to Ron Burkle, and we were putting the deal together and got my hands on the contours of it, and said, okay, I think we can make this look good. And then Ron had a special issue with regard to his ownership of a player agency, which is one of the kind of unresolvable conflicts. And all this has been told publicly, so I don't have too many qualms saying a lot about it. He owned a media business that had a player agency as part of it. And that's one of the unwaivable conflicts in the NBA world, in the sports world, that you can't structure it anyway. And, I basically got told, if you want to play in the deal, you got to sell the media stake. And he said, I can't do that for a variety of different reasons. And so he calls me one Saturday and says, okay, so Stern says I can't do it, but do you know Vivek Ranadive? And I said, well, I know who he is. I don't know him personally. We've got a lot of common friends. I've heard good things. He says, well, he's going to call you in 15 minutes, and we'll be ready to go. So I had a very nice talk with Vivek, and he's now one of my best friends and one of my favorite people in the world, and he's just been an exceptional partner. But we had a struggle to kind of put together the deal that was going to work. We had to have site control of an alternative arena. The NBA held our feet to the fire over having, sort of being ready to build an arena within 3 years. We had to agree to sell the team back to the league at cost if we didn't get the arena done. Like all sorts of, pretty nasty business terms that we're like, okay, we can get it done. And we did. So we got Golden One Center open 3.5 years ago, and almost 4 years ago now.
That's an important piece to us, creating a successful franchise.
It was a critical piece, and we have the downtown mall. We replaced a outdoor failing downtown mall in Sacramento with a gorgeous new facility that the community can rally around, and with a gorgeous plaza out front with a hotel and condos across from it, and we're leading the revitalization of that part of downtown. So it's been it's just been a pleasure throughout.
Right. Well, Chris, we're going to wrap up. This has been fantastic and as enjoyable as I knew it would be. I really appreciate the time.
Well, it's good of you to keep taking good care of Hoyas this way, and everybody should turn on their networks. It's going to be a pretty rough time out there, but we'll get through it and come back stronger.
Absolutely. Best of luck. Hope the family, everyone remains safe, and good luck with all the good work you're doing.
All right. Thanks so much, Rich.
Take care.
Bye-bye.